Okay, welcome to today's Comp C3 session. We have a really exciting lineup of speakers today to talk to us about alternative career paths in medical physics. So the very unique and interesting paths these different individuals have taken who all have a background in medical physics, just like all the graduate students in the audience today. Before we begin, we'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. All of us are all at different institutions, universities, and different places in the world that are all, we must acknowledge the original peoples of those lands. So today I'm coming from the University of Victoria, and we acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen, the Songhees, and Esquimalt peoples on whose territory the university stands, and the Lekwungen and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships of the land continue to this day. We do encourage you, no matter where you're coming from, to visit whose land and to find out which land your institution is situated on. So we're from the Comp Student Council, and we are an educational subcommittee involved in student and trainee interests in medical physics. We do a lot of different things, but mainly our mission is to help build a strong community. So we run events just like the one that you're sitting in today, these Comp Career Catalyst, but we organize social, academic, and professional development events all year round, but also at the Comp Academic Scientific Meeting. So some of these events, which you might know about, especially if you're headed to the ASM this year, are Students' Night Out, the Young Professionals Workshop, the Canadian Residency Fair, and Science Spoken Succinctly. I highly recommend you check these out if you're going to the Comp annual meeting this year. Particularly the Students' Night Out and the Young Professionals Workshop are looking really, really awesome, so definitely check those out. We also offer a student spotlight, so if you have members in your lab, friends, or even yourself who have had recent publications that you want showcased, we are happy to help you out, and we want to make sure that the graduate students in the Canadian community are getting the recognition they deserve for all their hard work. Today, you're watching the Comp Career Catalyst Seminar Series. This is a professional development series that is designed for students and trainees who are interested in enhancing their knowledge and developing skills for success in graduate school. So we cover a variety of topics. In the past, we've covered things like AI, we've covered things like residency, etc. And today, of course, we're covering alternative career paths in medical physics. If you're interested in any of these future sessions, you can catch the next advertisement on social media and also through our email list. Any past sessions are available on YouTube, so you can also check those out. Today, we have a list of very exciting speakers. So we're going to start with Dr. Ruth Wilkins, then Dr. Alexandra, and then Dr. Christopher Williams. During the talk, we do ask that you mute your mic, just to make sure that we can hear the speakers. After the session with the speakers is done, we will have a Q&A where you are more than welcome to ask as many questions as you'd like. You can either raise your hand and we will call upon you, or you can put them in the chat. A final notice that this session is being recorded and will be shared on YouTube, so just a heads up. And now Chloe will introduce our lovely speakers.
Yes, thank you, Jay. So our first speaker graduated with her PhD in medical physics from Carleton University. She now leads the Ionizing Radiation Health Sciences Division at the Consumer and Clinical Radiation Protection Bureau of Health Canada since 2006. She also served as the head of the Canadian Biodosimetry Network for large-scale exposures to ionizing radiation, in which Canada has developed a network of laboratories which can provide rapid dosimetry during large-scale events. Her research expertise are in the areas of biological effects and biological markers of low doses of radiation. So everyone, please welcome our first speaker, Dr. Ruth Wilkins. Dr. Wilkins, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen and hope that that works more smoothly than it did the first time. Let me know when you can see the slides. And I can start talking while it's coming up anyway. So I thought I would just start with describing who I am and how I got to where I am. So as Chloe said, I'm a research scientist and a division manager at the Ionizing Radiation Health Sciences Division, the Consumer and Clinical Radiation Protection Bureau, and that is part of Health Canada, and I work in Ottawa. And this is our lovely building. Right, I'll get my pointer up. No pointer. Maybe you can see it if I do this. Can you see my pointer that way?
Yes.
Sorry, it's just, my computer is slow today. Okay, I'm going to do this. Okay, so this is our building here in Ottawa. And what we do in the CCRPB is that our mandate is to really administer the RAD Act, which is here, the Radiation Emitting Devices Act, which includes all devices that emit radiation all the way along the whole spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, and also includes acoustical radiation. So any device that generates any of this type of radiation. So it's quite a large span, a large scope. How did I get to this position? I started with a BSc in chemical physics at Trent University. And when I got to the end of my physics degree, I thought that I really wanted to do something a little bit more human related. So I did a master's in biophysics at UBC, and then I came back to Ottawa and did a PhD in medical physics at Carleton University. Immediately after I graduated, I was lucky to get a position at Health Canada, where I've been working as a research scientist ever since 1996. And in 2002, I became the manager of the division. So what do I do? At Health Canada, as I said, we administer the RAD Act, but our lab specifically is looking at what are the health and biological effects of exposure to ionizing radiation. So my work is just focused on the ionizing part of the spectrum of radiation. So within that, we do research, but we also have a service that we conduct biodosimetry, and that is a method for measuring the dose received from ionizing radiation using biological material from exposed individuals. So we have a biology lab, so you can see a couple of our researchers working with cell tissue culture. So we're working in sterile conditions. We have a lot of microscope work, and we do a lot of cytogenetics, looking at chromosome damage. So there's a huge number of endpoints that we do, but it's a very biology-based lab, even though I am indeed a medical physicist. So I'm using the knowledge that I gained from medical physics to help understand the biological effects of the ionizing radiation. So I don't have time today to talk to you about all of the things we do in the lab, but what I would like to do is just tell you a little bit about biological symmetry. So this is the service that we provide, and we also do research into novel methods for biological symmetry. So biological symmetry is just looking at damage in someone's biological material to determine how much radiation they've been exposed to, and it can be used for accidental exposures. It's often used when people, nuclear energy workers who are wearing physical dosimeters, get a reading on their badge that is disputed or somehow compromised. So say they get a badge reading of 2 gray and they're like, there's no way I got 2 gray. So we can look at their sample and determine whether or not they were exposed to that level. And to link to one of our other speakers, we also do biodosimetry on astronauts. We look at their biological damage in their blood samples before and after they go into space to determine how much radiation they receive when they're on the International Space Station. And we can also use this in the case of some sort of radiological terrorist attack. So if there was some nuclear event where lots of people were exposed to ionizing radiation, we would be able to determine how much they've been exposed to and whether or not they need medical intervention. So we provide biological dosimetry for occupational exposures for the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. We help respond to nuclear emergencies with the Federal Nuclear Emergency Response, and we have collaborations with the Canadian Space Agency. So briefly, these are just some techniques that we use for biological dosimetry, looking all from blood samples, looking at different types of damage within the blood cells. And I'm just going to talk briefly about the dicentrics and the translocation analysis, as these are the two that we use the most. So when cells are exposed to radiation, the DNA gets broken. So this is a picture of human chromosomes, and mostly chromosomes have 1 centromere. So you can see the little kind of a waistline on each of these X's, and we have 46 of these chromosomes in each of our cells. And when you get irradiated, this DNA can be broken, and sometimes the DNA misrepairs so that you end up with a chromosome with 2 centromeres and then an acentric fragment. So this is an actual human cell here, and you can see the dicentric cell here and the fragment here. This type of damage is considered unstable damage. It's lethal to the cell, so it doesn't stick around for a long time. It means that the cell can't pass through mitosis. When it tries to divide, it will die. So this type of measurement is best for acute exposures or exposures in the recent past. We can also look at stable damage, which is not lethal to the translocations. And as you can see, this damage is generated the same way. There are two chromosomes that are being broken, but the chromosomes exchange pieces. And then you get two chromosomes that just have single centromeres. And as you can see on this image here, if we paint these chromosomes different colors, you can see where here's a yellow and a red, and a yellow and a red chromosome have switched pieces. So this is not measurable with just a single color stain like the dicentric assay, but we can look at more damage in the cell with the painted chromosomes. We call this fluorescence in situ hybridization. So it's just translocation analysis using fish. So these make the cells that are still stable, so they last for a long time. They can go through mitosis. So this type of analysis is best for chronic exposures or exposures more in the distant past. So how do we do biodosimetry? We take a blood draw from healthy volunteers, we irradiate the blood, process the samples, analyze the damage, and then we generate a calibration curve as a function of dose and the amount of damage that we measure as a function of dose. And then when we get a blood sample with an unknown exposure, we process it, we analyze the damage, and then from our calibration curve, we can just read the amount of damage off that calibration curve and determine what the dose is. So how does biodosimetry help? For occupational exposures, it can help determine whether a worker has exceeded their annual limit of radiation. So if they've received too much radiation, then they can be moved around in their job so that they're not, the risk of being exposed to more radiation can be reduced in the future. For large accidental exposures, we can help determine the course of medical intervention. So on this image here, you can see the dose and on the y-axis, the risk of death. So if an individual gets exposed to radiation, this is the LD50 curve, we call it, and you can see that about 50% of the individuals would die from an acute whole body exposure of radiation at around 3 gray. If we can provide some minimal support to these individuals, we can push this curve to the right and increase their chance of survival. And then for even higher doses, we can do more intensive therapies such as stem cell transplants, and we can really have an effect on pushing this curve to the right. So it's important to know what the dose is. If someone receives under 2 gray of radiation, then there's nothing, there should be fine in the long term besides long-term increased risk of cancer. But in the short term, dealing with acute radiation syndrome, there was not much that we would do. For higher doses, we would give some supportive care. And then for higher doses in the sort of 6 to 8 to 10 gray range, we would do a stem cell transplant to really improve their chance of survival. But it's important to know what range these people are. You don't want to be giving stem cell transplants to everyone because they have other risks associated with them. And if someone has received over 10 gray, then the sad news is that there's nothing that we can do, so we don't spend any resources on these individuals. And to talk a bit about astronaut symmetry, which I thought was really cool until I saw that one of our speakers is already an astronaut, so this sort of pales in comparison to what he's going to talk about. But anyway, it links us together. As I'm sure Chris knows, astronauts are exposed to higher levels of radiation on space than they are on Earth. So what we do with astronauts is that we take a blood sample from each astronaut before they go up into space, and then they get their own individualized calibration curve. And then when they come back from their time on the ISS, we get a second sample and we can look at how much they've been exposed to using their own personalized calibration curve. So they're pretty special. Nobody else can get that. But the advantage of astronauts is that we know they're going to be exposed to radiation, so we can look at their pre-exposure sample, whereas typically we only know people have been exposed after the fact. So it's unfortunately a very small group of people, but it is a nice group of healthy individuals who are exposed to radiation that we know they're going to be exposed to radiation. So they're a very nice steady population. So just to summarize, tell you a bit about working for the government. It has advantages. I get to do very interesting research. I have some I have a salary in research that's not dependent on grants, so I don't have to worry. I can get external grants to increase my research, but my job does not depend on me getting a grant. So there's some stability there. We get great benefits and pensions. Have an opportunity to work internationally, so I get to do some travel, and we have also opportunities to meet interesting people like astronauts. And here's a picture of our group meeting with David Saint-Jacques after we had done his biodosimetry. So that's always fun. So that's all I have for you today, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. We'll just have to wait at the end of the 3 presentations before we actually take questions. But please, if someone has questions, keep them for the end. So we'll go over to the next speaker. So our next speaker was selected by NASA in 2021 to be part of the Astronaut Candidate Class. Prior to this, he held the position of assistant professor at Harvard Medical School in Boston. He served as the medical physicist within the Radiation Oncology Department at the Brigham and Women's Hospital and Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, where he played a key role as the lead physicist for the Institute's MR-guided adaptive radiation therapy program. During his time in Boston, his research focused on pioneering new image guidance techniques for cancer treatments. So it is my pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Christopher Williams. Dr. Williams, I'll pass over to you. I think you're muted, Dr.
There we go. Yep. Hey, everybody. Hopefully you can see my screen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you guys. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what I thought I would try to talk about with all of you is a little bit about my career path, but I also wanted to kind of bridge that with talking about how being a medical physicist has really helped me in my current job. And then a little bit about, as Dr. Wilkins kind of referred to, about radiation and human spaceflight and some of the opportunities I think there are in that direction for medical physicists. So I've had a very unusual career path, I would say. I think like probably many of us, we sort of have some spark that leads us down our career trajectory into science. And, for me, I was always interested in space as a kid, and that was what sort of got me interested in studying physics. And actually, for a lot of my education, I wasn't doing medical physics. I was doing astronomy and astrophysics. So I did astronomy and astrophysics as an undergraduate. I had some really awesome internship opportunities, and went on to do a physics PhD, but focusing on developing radio telescopes and doing early universe cosmology. But after my PhD, I decided to make a switch and move into medical physics. There are a lot of reasons for that, but I think one of the biggest ones for me was just the direct impact that working in medical physics can have on the lives of others. And that was something that meant a lot to me, and something that I wanted to pursue. And I thought that medical physics was such a wonderful field where you can combine, being a scientist, but also having very direct impact on people in the world around you, with a very short sort of turnaround time, and when your work directly impacts somebody else. So I made my career switch at basically at a time where I was able to get sort of go directly from my straight physics PhD into a clinical physics residency. And I was in Boston for graduate school, and was able to kind of stay around in Boston at the Harvard program there. And I loved it. Had an absolutely wonderful time as a resident, and stuck around as faculty there. So what did I do as a medical physicist? So I did sort of a 50-50 hybrid between clinical care and research. So my research focused on respiratory motion modeling and imaging technology development. So how can we sort of look at patients who are breathing and increase our precision of how we can treat their cancers sort of while they're breathing, while reducing the dose we give to sort of the surrounding tissues. I also worked a lot on MR-guided radiotherapy. This was also what became some of my clinical focus. I helped work on our MR-guided radiotherapy program and was sort of the clinical physics lead for implementing that. And so it was great because I could kind of tie together my motion management research with my clinical practice of working on delivering with MR-guided motion management for like pancreatic cancer and lung cancer, which we did a lot of. But then I made another giant turn in my career trajectory. NASA had put out a call for a new class of astronauts in early 2020. And they do this, NASA does this about every 4 years. In Canada, there's a similar process. Canadian Space Agency had their last selection in 2017 and had one in 2009 before that. So, sort of every few years, there are these sort of calls for applications. And, since space had always been something I'd been really interested in as a kid and had been something that had inspired me to go into science, I, sort of never lost sight of that dream. So I was lucky enough to, there were 12,000 applicants for 10 slots. And, I was just incredibly lucky to get an interview and to get this position. I mean, I think, this is a panel on alternative career paths for medical physicists. And I would never discourage anybody from applying to be an astronaut. I think if you have an interest, you should absolutely do it, but it's a very low probability thing. So, I think that, that you got to be lucky, but but you also have to put yourself out there if you want to take advantage of, if you want to put yourself in a position to be lucky. So I was part of the most recent class in astronauts. So we had 10 selected from the US, as well as 2 international partner astronauts from the United Arab Emirates. And we have an extremely diverse mix of backgrounds. We have several folks that came from sciences and also medicine, physician, bioengineer, and myself, as well as a bunch of people who have engineering backgrounds, pilots, but huge mix of backgrounds. So I joined NASA beginning of 2022, and just a few months ago, sort of completed my initial astronaut candidacy training and graduated, and now working just as a full-fledged member of the astronaut office. So I thought I would just give you a little vignette of sort of what astronaut training is like, because I think this connects a little bit to some of what I'm going to talk about in a second about how medical physics helped prepare me for this. So it's about a 2-year training program, and there's sort of several key areas we work on. International Space Station, robotics, which has very strong connections to Canada. So we actually do a lot of training with the Canadian Space Agency and do robotic arm training in Montreal. Extravehicular activities, so spacewalk training. We do flight training and aviation training. We do language training, and also do work on expeditionary skills, do some field geology, and just sort of practicing working in small groups and small teams in austere environments. So, all right, so I moved from being a medical physicist to an astronaut. And I think reflecting on this, I mean, there are a few things that, a few skills that I was able to develop through my medical physics education and through practicing as a clinical physicist that I think both helped me get selected as an astronaut, but also have directly translated into helping me succeed at this job. And I think it's something that we, so I think one of the big things is, as a medical physicist, you will often work in a very diverse team of people, but all united towards a common goal. For instance, in my clinical radiotherapy practice, I would work with physicians, radiation therapists, dosimetrists, all who had different backgrounds, different professional backgrounds, different technical areas of expertise, but we all had to work together and, sort of talk to each other and sort of bridge the differences in our backgrounds to get to a good common solution for how to best help the patient that's in front of us. And that skill set has really helped me at NASA, where, I sort of described the academic diversity in our group, but, as an astronaut, you're one member of a team, all with the common goal of advancing human spaceflight, but you have your sort of domain specific expertise. And other people will have theirs. And when you sort of are working on developing new programs, new technologies, or figuring out how to implement technologies, that all comes together. That all really rests on this background. Also, analytic thinking that crosses disciplines. So in a lot of medical physics research, you need to think about all right, I'm thinking about this from a physics viewpoint, but then also as sort of our previous speaker alluded to, how does that connect to biology? And so thinking deeply, but also thinking broadly. And then, using new technologies and understanding how to use them to accomplish a mission and working in an operational environment. As a clinical physicist, you would, on a day-to-day basis, you make decisions that can impact patients, and sort of understanding how that works and the responsibility you take in that. So those same skills have helped me as an astronaut, but I also think they have very broad applicability across many disciplines. And so I'm thinking about alternative careers for medical physics. Like, I think all of us should think about these skills that we develop, and that, they're very useful as a medical physicist, but can also apply in many, many different areas. For the second part of the talk, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what NASA is doing currently, and what's going on more broadly in space exploration, and where medical physicists can help. So right now, the International Space Station is sort of where the bulk of sort of human space flight is focused. So we have this orbiting research lab that has been continuously crewed since 2000. So coming up on 24 years in orbit. It's 400 kilometers above the Earth. Orbits the Earth every 90 minutes, and it's a huge international partnership of 5 space agencies, 15 countries. And typically, astronauts go up for about 6 months missions. There's typically a crew of 7, and we're planning on continuing to operate the space station through 2030, when hopefully we'll have some more space stations that are being developed with collaboration from private industry. And we do a ton of research on the ISS. So physical sciences, life sciences, remote sensing technology, and microgravity. Enable research, but radiation is a key component of this. We do a lot of biology and radiation related research on the ISS. But we've also are currently in the midst of trying to push further into deep space. There is a program that we've got going on, I'll talk about in a second, called the Artemis program, where we're trying to go back to the moon, and then eventually onto Mars. And it's a huge international collaboration. US and Canada are both part of it. And the slide is even out of date, since we've had a few members join just in the past few days. But I also did want to highlight that the next mission in the Artemis campaign, the Artemis 2, is actually going to have Jeremy Hansen, the first Canadian astronaut who's going to leave Earth orbit and orbit around the moon. And this is planned to launch late next year. So space radiation ties this all together. It's one of the biggest sort of unknowns and hazards that we think of when we think of the challenges of spaceflight. And yeah, I mean, as Dr. Wilkinson kind of said, space is a radiation environment. It's mainly high energy particles, protons mainly, and you get a huge sort of variety in both the energy spectrum and the population of particles, depending on the state of the sun and the interaction with the sun, and sort of how active the sun is. But major components are solar radiation, including solar particle events, where you kind of get a big burst of protons, galactic cosmic rays, as well as trapped radiation by the Earth's magnetic field. It's interesting because you get one type of radiation exposure on the space station now, but then thinking about moving out beyond low Earth orbit into the moon and beyond, you also are getting sort of a different sort of exposure. Right now we sort of So I'll leave it at that for the purpose of this talk. But the radiation dose basically depends on the mission profile and the state of the sun. But on the space station, we can get somewhere between 300 and 450 micrograys a day. And if you go out to deep space, you can get even a little bit higher radiation doses, but sort of different, because now you're getting sort of more of galactic cosmic rays than what you're getting sort of in low Earth orbit. And single solar particle events that shoot off a bunch of mainly protons can give you 200, 400 millisieverts of dose if you don't have any shielding. So that's you're starting to get into pretty significant sort of single event doses that we need to really worry about. And it's difficult to protect against, because our standard medical physics thinking of time, distance, and shielding we can't leverage those like we would in a terrestrial environment. Time is often set by mission constraints. The radiation is essentially isotropic in space. You can't really move away from the source. And shielding is we usually use mass to shield, and that's kind of hard because we're limited in the mass we can get up to space. And for high energy particles, it's even harder still. So to try to wrap up a little quickly, so the dose limits for astronauts. Right now, NASA has a dose limit of 600 millisieverts over an astronaut's total career. And the main sort of, rationale for this is it's based on roughly a 3% increase in your mean risk of radiation exposure induced death. And we do have additional dose limits for non-cancerous effects, like short-term acute doses, particularly things that might might lead to issues in actually accomplishing your mission or getting home safely. Historically, this is sort of a plot actually showing of all astronauts, up until about 2008, of what their historical doses have been over time. And the thing I want to point out is that you can sort of see where we are for the International Space Station in these doses, but the purple line at the top is our NASA career radiation limit, and the orange box just above that is our sort of best guess estimate for what the dose might be for a mission to Mars. So, the difference between those two lines is a problem if we want to continue our exploration out into the solar system. So I think that opens up some opportunities for medical physicists. I think some big questions that we're trying to struggle with in space radiation is that, space radiation is really different than our terrestrial experience base. We have a different particle and LET distribution than we're used to thinking about, and that has some really interesting radiobiological questions. And we have very limited human and in vivo data. Astronauts generally will, participate in research and share our, share our blood samples and our radiation exposures that we're aware of. But it's a very limited population, and sort of trying to understand and sort of tackle these problems are something where I think there's a lot of opportunities. Medical physicists can very directly be involved in space radiation research. So trying to better characterize and model some of these higher energy particles and the biologic effects they might have is a huge area, as well as developing novel shielding and countermeasures. And these are types of research or areas that medical physicists can work in that are not necessarily the sort of traditional areas that folks might be researching in, but I think could have huge impacts on helping further space exploration. And then the other thing I wanted to just kind of leave a plug for is that, just everything that medical physicists do in terms of working on improving imaging or, characterization or detection of cancers or radiation effects and how to treat those, those all help us get to Mars. Our radiation dose exposures are based on how much dose limits are based on how much dose we can receive to have a roughly 3% increase in our risk of radiation-induced death. And if we get better at detecting cancers, treating them, and sort of understanding how to tackle that, and radiation is a key part of that. Radiation therapy is a key part of that. We can help make it so that we can do a Mars mission without exceeding that 3% threshold. So just kind of wanted to leave that with a plug for that there. So I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. And at the end of the session, I'd be more than happy to stick around and take some questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. That was pretty amazing. So interesting. So we're now to our last speaker already. So our last speaker graduated with her PhD in physics at Carleton University under the National Research Council of Canada's Medical and Industrial Dosimetry Group, where she became an expert in metrology and dosimetry. She completed a postdoctoral research at the German National Metrology Institute on dosimetry of ultra-high dose rate electron beams. Since May 2023, she holds the position of research associate at Canada's National Research Council, where she works in the field of metrology, focusing on radionuclide measurements. So let's welcome our third speaker, Dr. Alexandra Bourgoin. Dr. Bourgoin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Oh, I could turn on my camera. I can't turn on my camera anymore. Sorry. Anyway, I think the point is for the purpose. For the presentation, I decided to focus a little bit about the path of itself and not my present career. So I made something a little bit different from the two previous speakers. So let's take a long walk with me with my path to the position where I am. So I started my study with a bachelor degree in physics from University Laval. So in fall 2008, I started a undergrad degree in physics. And the reason really why I chose physics was because I love physics. And I'm French Canadian, so I'm from this from Quebec. And in Quebec, we have this cégep, so this college degree between high school and university. And while I was doing my cégep, I was really love physics and I was quite good at it. But I had a friend that unfortunately, I'm sure most of you also known, were quite bad in physics. And I was helping her a lot. And so I decided to start my undergrad in physics, thinking that, yes, being a cégep teacher was a career that very much interested me, was quite straightforward, do an undergrad in physics, then some extra course you have to do, and then you can do a career. But and also the reason why I decided to go at Laval University in Quebec City was a very pragmatic reason. It was simply during the March break of cégep session, I had my acceptance letter from Laval and not the one from Montreal. And that was the only time I could go see the city to visit for some apartments. So literally it was a very straightforward decision. I had my acceptance letter from Quebec and not Montreal. And so I started my first years, and at the beginning of my second year semester, I decided I wanted to try a summer research project. The reason being because I was quite good at the experimental course. I thought it would be a great experience. And again, very practically, it was better paid and I had better working condition than on a farm, which was actually what I did in my first summer. So I thought, yeah, why not? That would be great. So at L'Université Laval, it's mainly known for optic and medical physics. And then I did read about medical physics and it was looking very interesting and I was quite interested into that. And so I applied for a summer project and I got accepted. So ironically, I had to work with optics in clinical physics. And that also led to a winter project. So we had the opportunity in my last year to do a course where you're actually doing a research, and which I did for my last semester, during my last semester, and that also led to get me a master project at the same group. So in winter 2011, I graduated and I already had a contract for a master project. So in December 2011, I started my master degree in medical physics at University Laval, but mostly based at the hospital center, university, for the translation. So it's a university linked hospital, if you wish. And the reason I decided to go for it was that I could continue doing research, and I just love it. I really love to be in the lab and doing measurements. But also there was a part of me that really felt like, okay, this is the next step I'm supposed to do. And I mean, at the end of the day, what else could I have done with my bachelor degree in physics? And I think some of us feel that way, that after the bachelor in physics, you cannot, like, you have to keep going. And it seems like the way to go for me. So the research project was going very well, so well that I added some extra part to my project for because I was because the first part went very well, and so there was more measurements that was added. But meanwhile, we were also doing classes and we were also finding out what it meant to be medical physicists. And one particular course I remember was treatment planning for external radiotherapy. In that course, we had to actually work with a treatment planning system. And I found out that I really didn't like it. I didn't have so much patience for it. And I really felt like, yep, I'm finishing my thesis and I'm just actively looking for a PhD and not for a medical physicist position. Because if you don't know, in Quebec, after your master, you can do, at that time, you could directly apply to try to become a medical physicist. So for me, it was like, yep, no, this is not for me. This is not my path. So in winter 2014, I started a PhD degree, also in medical physics, but at the Université de Sherbrooke. So why I selected Sherbrooke was, again, I'm still a very practical person. My family was based in Sherbrooke at that point. I have heard very positive comments about the lab. So it's basically, they're mainly doing imaging. So MRIT and PET scan, they're very strong on that. And also I could do my PhD in French. So at that time I was actively learning English, but I was still not comfortable enough to make a switch to do it in English. And at that point in my life, I was kind of, okay, I don't want to be a medical physicist, but I've done my bachelor, I've done my master. I guess the PhD is the next step, right? And I could have the goal of kind of staying in academia. And I also thought, okay, imaging is very cool and Sherbrooke seems to be a good place. And I could continue doing research, which I still really love at that point. So I was like, okay, like, it seems to be the path I'm supposed to take. But a year later, I kind of hit a wall and I had to terminate my contract after just being 1 year doing my PhD. And the reason was very simple, is because I didn't like it and I was unhappy. So I didn't like the project. I found myself doing a lot of biology and culture science. And I know the other speakers seem to really like biology, but I also knew that it wasn't for me. I prefer the dosimetry part, working with ion chamber, for example. And the other thing was that I couldn't see myself in the next step. I was really not sure what I would do with that PhD when it would be done and what would be the next step. And all this seems quite blurry. So I terminated my contract, which was a breath of fresh air a little bit, because like I said, I was unhappy, but it was also very panicking because I feel like when you're in physics and then you're doing your master and then you're like, okay, this is the path I'm supposed to take. This is the length it's supposed to take me. This is the grades I'm supposed to have. It's like, it feels like every step is already written for you. And that was kind of panicking for me to say, okay, I'm taking a break to say what I'm doing and to figure out what I want. And so that's what I did. I sit down and I ask myself, what do I want? So I knew, okay, I love research. This is the thing I really love. It's not because I didn't like the project I was doing that I don't love research. And I genuinely like medical physics. It's not because I didn't like the clinical part of it that I didn't like medical physics. Actually, dosimetry was really very interesting. And I was like, okay, if being in academia is a real goal for me and it's a real endpoint, I need to improve my English, but I still want to be close enough to my family. So I didn't want to go as far as Vancouver, for example. It felt a little bit too far away from me. So I did some research and I contacted directly three researcher from Eastern Ontario, which is still close enough to Quebec, so not too far, but really in the English part. And I targeted three researchers that I knew from looking at their publication that were really working in the dosimetry field, because I was, okay, if I want to do this PhD, I need to be happy. I need to love that, what I'm doing. And I feel like a dosimetry project is really what I need. And then I received an email about measuring WR, a constant. And to be frank, I had to look back in my document to figure out back what it was. But I remember reading using a calorimeter, and I really remember from one of our class I had during my master, a very brief conversation about how calorimeter was the most direct method of measuring the dose from radiation. And I felt like, oh, this is so cool. But I also remember hearing it's not practical, but I was like, I could do a project working with this thing I found so cool. And at the same time, it was at a certain National Research Council of Canada, which I never heard about before. So I was quite intrigued. So a few email exchange, a phone call interview was suggested, but I did ask for a in-person visit instead. And why I did that, it's because I knew my strengths was in my passion. I knew that even if my English could be flaky at that time, a lot of extra H or missing H as a good French Canadian speaking English, I thought I will look passionate and that will be really well seen in person, but also I would be able to visit the facility in the office. And from my experience of starting a PhD and quitting it, one thing I really saw was that, yes, your project is important. Yes, who's your supervisor is important, but who you're going to work with, where you're going to work with, in which condition, and which access you have to facility are important thing that's going to make the difference between a successful project, or at least a project that will, make you be happy to work in. Is so I thought that for me was very important. So in fall 2015, I started my PhD in medical physics again at Carleton University. So I was kind of back on my goal to stay in academia, but I found myself to be into a national metrology lab, which is not quite of university. So let's take a little bit of a off road quickly here. So just to say, what is metrology? So first of all, metrology has nothing to do with meteorology. Just want to say it, nothing to do with the weather. It's the science of measurements. And I always love to say it's also the science of measuring its uncertainty. So metrology is really about the precision and accuracy in any kind of measurement. So the gram, dimensions, but also dose. And for radiation here, for medical physics, it would be degree. So I found myself doing a project, a PhD project about measuring a constant. And I know it might sound weird, but I found it so cool to measure a constant. But I know from my fellow PhD student at that time, I'm kind of offset. I'm off the grid for what is cool scale. But anyway, I didn't care like the others wouldn't find it so interesting. I found it super interesting, and I was really absolutely in love with my project. I remember being just 1 month here in metrology and felt like, oh my God, I think I was a meteorologist without knowing I was a meteorologist before coming here. And I just badly wanted to stay here. But unfortunately, the job opening here in the radiation group for meteorology is very rare. It's about every 2-3 years maximum. So in summer 2020, I successfully defended my thesis, but I really had to move on at that point because there was no opening in the group where I was. So I took the leap and I say, okay, maybe not being meteorology, so I can go back to my goal to stay in academia. And then I decided to move in Germany to do a postdoc in September 2020. So yes, at the beginning of the pandemic, I decided to move in a different country. So I started a postdoc at the German version of the National Research Council of Canada. It's called the PDB. And again, the reason was just simply I love to do research. I could still do meteorology. And again, it just felt to me, okay, this is technically the next step I'm supposed to take. And the reason I selected Germany, so I'm still a very practical person. So basically, the place where the PDB is situated in Germany is in a very small town, about the quarter of the size of Ottawa, while the one for the France is very close to Paris, and the one in the UK is very close to London. And one thing I had found out is that the salary are basically pretty much the same for any place you go in Europe as a postdoc for working for a national meteorology institute. However, the price of living in Paris or London are much more bigger than this town in Germany called Braunschweig, with a little bit less than 250,000 inhabitants. So it was kind of practical, but also the project in itself was really leveraging all the skills I had learned from my PhD, and I knew for my postdoc, or at least I was having this expectation, okay, I'm supposed to publish at least one paper per year. I better to take a project that I know a lot, or at least have the good sets of skills to start with. But again, I had to terminate a contract before the end of it. So I had to terminate my contract 6 months earlier, because I received a text message telling me that there were a job opportunity back for me to come back at NRC, which I was very excited for. And now, since May 2023, I have taken new adventure. I came back with the home in the building I was doing my PhD in, but however, now I'm doing something different. I'm working with a different unit, and every time I try to explain how big of a change of a field it is, I know people say it's radiation for radiation, but for a meteorologist, changings of a unit is a lot. It's a big step. So now I'm basically working with the Becquerel and I'm working with radioisotope metrology. So today, I decided to discuss a little bit about my path than actually what is my career and what I'm doing. Because like I mentioned, the probability that you get a job opportunity at the National Research Council of Canada to work as a medical physicist here doing meteorology is very small. And I thought a little bit about discussing about how, sometimes you start with a specific goal, and I think I'm very far away from being a CEGEP teacher at the moment, and that's okay. And I know how cheesy it sounds, but it's still very much true. Know yourself. Accept to learn more about yourself in every step. So for example, going in Germany, I thought I was very much my priority in life is my career. That's what makes me happy. And then 1 month being in Germany, I was like, oh my God, I just want to be back home. This is too far away from my family. And I had to accept that my priority had changed, and I had to make decision. And luckily for me, I had this opportunity to be a meteorologist close by home. But yeah, be open to the different opportunity. And one big thing is to really leverage your strengths and your skill. So for me, again, my skills was using it for my postdoc, but my strengths also. I mean, I'm very talkative person. Usually it's a bad thing because I put the foot of in my mouth, but sometimes it's a very good thing because I had the opportunity to go in Germany and have the link with this, because during a conference, this very tall German guy just simply asked me a question about why I didn't measure it in a 50 MeV beam. And from that conversation started, and I got the opportunity to go. So I think that's what I wanted to emphasize today into the decision making on your career. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bourgoin. That was great. Very interesting. So this concludes our 3 talks. So now we're going to dive into the Q&A. So the floor is open for questions. You can type them in the chat, or you can also raise your hand to ask them directly. So we'll just check if there's any questions.
There is a question in the chat from Andrew directed to Dr. Williams, and he has asked, what type of radiation dosimetry equipment do astronauts have on their person? Is it personal dosimeters, other things? Is it something like Ruth Wilkins talked about on the ISS? Are there survey meters? What about on a Mars mission?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so the short answer is, yeah, we do on the space station have personal dosimeters. They used to be, I was going to say film badges, but really TLDs and OSLDs that we would sort of wear around any sort of hospital or radiation environment. Recently, we've switched over to an active dosimeter where we can get sort of more real-time readouts of what the dose is that we're receiving. And then when we do particularly risky things like do an extravehicular activity, we'll usually take an additional dosimeter with us through that activity. So when you're sort of in a spacesuit outside the space station, you're just a lot less shielded. And so, we kind of view the risk as greater. In addition, we do also have a radiation detector on the space station that can do a little bit more, sort of try to can discriminate sort of different particles and some of their energies. Moving forward to sort of the moon, Mars, and beyond, it's a little bit of an open question exactly kind of what we're going to do. A lot of the early and I'm not an expert in this area, but a lot of the early science investigations are trying to look for radiation. The Artemis 1 mission, which flew I guess a couple of years ago now, it was an uncrewed test flight around the moon. Actually had a phantom, humanoid phantom embedded with a bunch of dosimeters in it to try to get a look at what those exposures might be in lunar orbit. And yeah, and I think it's anybody's guess as to what we'll have when we go to Mars. Hopefully, we'll have even better technology to kind of help us characterize what we're facing and kind of connecting that to what it might mean for for the folks that go out there.
Nice. I'm just waiting if there's any more questions from the audience. If not, I'll ask one myself to Dr. Bourgoin. I was wondering, do you regret starting your first PhD, or are you glad of what you learned from it? Would you do the same if you could, like, redo all of this?
Today, yes. I have to say, like, I think I didn't mention so much, but I have to say I felt ashamed a little bit for a while. It feels like, there's this path you're supposed to take. But you know what? Like 2 weeks ago, I visited back Sherbrooke to present the work of NRC and for seeking for collaboration. And actually, it led for one of our colleagues already started to work together with someone, and then I leverage my strength here. And actually, no, I don't, because I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about, and it did also gave me a real purpose to come back. And also, I don't know, maybe applying a year earlier to NRC and sending this email to Malcolm McEwen a year earlier might have, not led for us having the budget for this. So no, I don't have regrets, and I think we shouldn't have regrets about these things, and we should have I regret seeing it as a step back. I think I should have just kept seeing as a step forward.
Nice. That's great.
Thank you. I have a question for Dr. Wilkins. You kind of briefly mentioned the Radiation Emitting Devices Act, which, like, I know the Health Canada kind of starts to deal with like the regulatory standpoint. And I was wondering, like, who determines the regulations for this type of stuff? Does it affect us as medical physicists? Are we involved at all in determining these regulations?
Yeah, so Health Canada devises the regulations, but they always go out for consultation. So we would always consult with the team of, people, stakeholders who would be involved with the use of these devices. So we're always reaching out to COMP to get consultation, for instance. Medical physicists play a big role in giving us feedback on the regulations that we have written. But regulations don't get changed very often. The Radiation Emitting Devices Act is really old, and it actually needs to be updated because it's so old that it's not particularly applicable. Like, they're still talking about film imaging and things that don't really exist anymore. So we're working now to try and modernize the RED Act, bring it into the 22nd century, whichever century we're in now. Yeah, so I say it's a team, like originally devised by Health Canada, but with a lot of consultation.
Is there anything particular you're hoping to see in an updated version?
So it's being a research scientist, I'm not as involved with the Act as some other of my colleagues within Health Canada. So some of the things that they talk about is being able to have a little bit more power within the Act for like seizing things coming across the border. Right now, we don't have the power. If something comes across the border that we don't think meets our regulations, we don't have the power to do anything about it. We can only provide recommendations. So I think just having more power, and then for some specific regulations within the Act for specific technologies, just updating them so that they're relevant to the technology that exists today.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll go again. We have a question from the audience. Yes, Omar, you can go.
Hello, everyone. So thank you, by the way, for being here. I very much appreciate your time. Question I'm always curious to understand. So most of us here in the audience were students, and a lot of our time is spent just researching, reading new papers that come out. So in your current roles, how much time do you spend just reading new research? And being out, now maybe outside of medical physics a little bit, what is it that you're reading exactly? I guess it's just a general question for any of you three.
I could start. So when I started my career as a research scientist, I spent a lot of time reading, keeping on top of all of the publications that were relevant to my field. And I was also you're always learning in your career. So you're always reading and trying to keep on top of what the new research is out there. As I say, as I get later in my career, I get more bogged down by administrative things because I'm now managing and I have not as much time in my career to read as I would like. So I wish that I had more time to do that. But it's key just to stay on top of what's going on out there so you can devise a research program that's relevant and new and try to stay cutting edge.
Yeah, and I can kind of comment a little bit. So I a lot of my job is training and learning. So learning space station systems, spacecraft systems. So I've traded in reading academic papers for reading sort of technical manuals and books. But I still try to, I think, one of the things I'm trying to do is to figure out how to bridge, my background in medical physics into something that can kind of help, and something that can kind of help. So I try to at least once a month pick up an academic paper to kind of read what's going on in either space radiation, which is a little bit new to me, or just sort of my old medical physics field. I think it's still, but I think as Wilkins said, like it's one of the things that I think is really interesting is that, at least for me, going through a PhD and sort of doing a lot of reading of papers has helped me in being able to sort of pick up something that technical and maybe is something on the surface that I don't know if I have the confidence to try to like actually digest and read, but to just say, you know what, I'm going to pick this up, I'm going to read it and get something out of that. So I think that's a very, you know, at least for me, it's been a very transferable skill, and it's something that's, you know, kind of fun to realize that that's, you know, something you can take away from.
I guess it's very similar to what Fruit and Christopher mentioned. Reading paper, so I'm beginning of career. So for me, I had to switch from dosimetry to now radioisotope. So I had to go back of some, you know, undergrad manual. I had actually a friend to ship me a book we had when we were undergrad for nuclear physics, actually. But yeah, a lot of research paper, but also it made me thought a funny thing is that I know medical physicists often have to read the AAPM task group, for example. And then actually in our institution, I have one colleague who's actually working on one at some point. So I guess from that side, we are more on the writing side than the reading side for these kind of thing.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, no, just because it's one of those things, right? As far as bridging from being a student to being someone who's actually working, right? That's one of those, I guess, changes that you're gonna have to adapt to, or we're gonna have to adapt to, is just how do we take what we spend a lot of time doing, and then, as you said, Dr. Williams, right? Like, you know, you've developed that skill of reading and parsing through, and now you can just get right to the details. So, yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you for that great response, everyone. I was wondering, for all of you, looking back, were there any moments that felt like kind of defining career moments that, you know, maybe shifted your career path or pointed you towards where you ended up?
I'm happy to start again because I have a very career-defining moment, and it's a small one, but it was very impactful for me. As I said, I started my career in pure physics. It was actually, I started in mathematical physics and then ended up in chemical physics. And I spent, I did a couple summers working at Carleton University with the particle physics group. And I got to the end and I was like, I know I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. So for me, the career defining moment was when I was in fourth year and we had a seminar series of physicists coming to the university once a month or so. And there was a biophysics or medical physicist who came and gave a talk. And for me, that was a complete mind-blowing talk. I thought, wow, I can actually use my undergraduate degree and just pivot a bit and then get into a field that seemed so much more interesting than what I was doing. So for me, that was it.
I actually have a very similar story to that. You know, I think for me, one of my career defining, so I also did sort of a pure physics PhD, but in astronomy and astrophysics. And I think it's a very similar story. At the end of my PhD, I was sort of looking for something that was going to have a little bit more of a, you know, I still love astronomy and astrophysics and love space, but I was looking for something that would have a little bit more of an immediate impact on people. And just so happened one of my very good friends was a radiation oncologist, and was like, oh, well, there's lots of physicists that work in radiation oncology. You should, you know, you should check that out. And I think for me, though, like I think the thing that kind of, and so that kind of led to me going into medical physics, but that was a hard jump because I'd felt like for my entire professional career up until that point, like ever since I was a kid, I'd always been like astronomy and astrophysics. That's what I know. That's what I've studied. And like, that's what I spent the past, you know, 5.5 years of my PhD, like ultra focusing on. Like medical physics is pretty darn different on the surface of it. But I kind of had enough things that kind of encouraged me to take the jump. And when I did, I realized that, you know, even though I thought my PhD was preparing me for like to be a very narrow specialist in this very like minute area, that actually the skills that you develop are super applicable. You know, how to pick up a paper and read it, how to analytically approach a research problem. And I think when I started in medical physics, kind of realizing that I wasn't starting from scratch, that I was actually, you know, had a lot of tools in my tool belt. And yeah, maybe I had to learn some biology and human anatomy stuff that I hadn't hadn't really ever studied whatsoever, but physics, imaging, a lot of the mathematical and computational techniques, like those tools, like you can just take and apply. And actually it even helped me in some of my early research, being able to take some of the astronomy, like imaging techniques, and apply those to radiation oncology data. And that, I think, helped me again in making my jump to my current job, where, since I'd done that before, I had a little bit less fear about sort of just jumping from something that I was, I was on a good path. I had a research group and, was very much ensconced in medical physics, but feeling that I could jump out of that and, make an impact at a high level in a totally different field. So I think, making my first sort of career switch was really impactful for me in sort of helping me recognize, some of the things that you get out of a sort of a physics education, and where that can take you.
I think for me, for sure, within the first month starting my PhD, I had this, oh my God, I love it here so much. It's like, it felt like, sorry for the French to Canadian, but I feel like Obélix, j'étais tombée dedans quand j'étais jeune, like kind of moment. Sorry, it's a very French Canadian thing, but I feel that's one thing. But another aspect I want to mention here, it's not a haha moment, but I think I presented well in the presentation how very unrelated decision making can bring you to the right place without knowing it. I mean, probably if I wasn't going in Quebec City, maybe I wouldn't have gone in medical physics to start with. And this is all based on a very practical thing, such as looking for an apartment. So I think having to embrace those very out of nowhere things that are not related to physics or career, and to just embrace those things, embrace those randomness, and yeah.
Nice, thank you. That was really interesting. Thank you for all your answers. So I'll maybe ask a quick last question to Dr. Williams. So you talked about the next NASA mission that is set to take place. I was wondering if you're planning to take part in such a mission in the near to mid future.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, our flight assignments aren't up to us, unfortunately, but if they were, I'd say absolutely. But I think the thing is, sort of as part of our role as astronauts, we fly on the missions, but we also work a lot in supporting them on the ground, as well as helping to develop them. Our sort of ground role is to be sort of an operational expert of, all right, we're going to employ this new technology. What do we need to think about for the people that are actually going to be using it and operating it to make it actually effective and make it accomplish that? So I think, I'm certainly planning on helping to contribute to that. And if I'm lucky enough to get to fly on one of those missions, I'd be really excited.
And maybe just continuing on that, like how do they choose who flies out and who stays on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us are planning on flying, and they're planning on sending all of us for some mission. They really try to look at the makeup of the crew and sort of a group of people that will work well together and have complementary skill sets and expertise. And then it's also a big international effort. And so, with different international partners and international agreements, there's sort of our seats that are allocated for sort of different partners, so NASA and CSA and Japan's Aerospace Agency, ESA, and et cetera. So it's that's kind of how it works.
Very cool. Thanks.
If there are no more questions, I think we will draw this session to a close. Firstly, I want to give a huge thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. We really appreciate it. So if everyone could give a awesome virtual applause to our speakers, that would be great. Thank you. Also, we want to let you guys know that our next session will be coming up on May 29th and is on leadership and development in medical physics. And we have another awesome 3 speakers that you can come learn from next month. So tune in for that. That'll be posted on Twitter, LinkedIn, and through your emails. Once again, thank you to our speakers and thanks everyone for attending today.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
the invitation. Bye.
Thank you.